Chapter 49, A Dumb Bitch, That's Enough. Damian stood there, holding Mara's fist effortlessly under everyone's eyes. The gymnasium was already starting to gather a bigger crowd. Seniors and other first-year students pushing through the doors to see what was happening. Many commoners from other sections rushed toward their fallen and injured friends, panic and anger on their faces. Damian's gaze swept across the scene. Around 40 heavily injured commoners were lying on the ground, groaning in pain. Some were bleeding, others were unconscious. Lysa, Edrin, and Ronan were among the most injured, their faces swollen, their clothes torn and bloodied. Damian didn't say anything, but his eyes started becoming colder and colder by the second. Then he shifted his gaze toward the group of over 20 nobles responsible for this, including Leonard, who stood at the front with his hands still casually in his pockets. Leonard's face showed no fear. In fact, he even smiled, as though there was nothing Damian could do about any of this. Damian's aura began to radiate outward, thick and oppressive. His crimson hair moved wildly in the invisible pressure. Several students in the crowd gasped and stepped back instinctively. What the hell? That pressure, is that really coming from a first year? Sensing Damian's intent, Mara yanked her fist back and glared at him. Don't even think about it. Her voice was sharp, authoritative. You, being a disciplinary committee member, have no right to attack students who aren't using aura. Damian stared at her for a long moment. Then, under the stupefied looks of everyone present, Damian first chuckled softly. But slowly, that chuckle transformed into full-blown laughter that echoed through the entire gymnasium. The crowd exchanged confused glances. Is he laughing? What the hell is wrong with him? After laughing for several seconds, Damian wiped a tear from his right eye with the back of his hand. Then he ran his fingers through his crimson hair, his grin widening. You are a very funny person, dear Mara. His voice dripped with mockery. Just a moment ago, you were about to smash Ronan's head in while he stood there without using his aura. And now, you have the audacity to preach rules to me. Mara's expression faltered slightly. Damian's smile vanished in an instant, replaced by cold fury. And looking around at what happened here, do you think I didn't hear everything before I stopped you? How just you and your actions are. Well, what did I expect from a brute like you? Clearly, you have no brain in that thick skull of yours. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Did he just? He's insulting a third-year student. Damian wasn't done. Tell me, Mara, whom did you inherit such defective genes from? Looks like I need to stay far away from the Kestrel noble family. Who knows? I might contract your stupidity just by talking with you lot. He tilted his head mockingly. Wow, Tilda, never in my life have I come across such a dumb bitch. Silence. Utter, suffocating silence spread across the entire gymnasium. Damian hadn't just insulted Mara. He'd insulted her entire noble house. The crowd was frozen in shock. Did he just? He insulted the Kestrel family. Is he insane? Insulting a noble house was no small thing. They held their pride to the utmost importance. Entire feuds had started over less. And sure enough, Mara's face turned ugly. Her expression twisted with rage as she released her aura in full force, the pressure slamming down on Damian like a tidal wave. Many students in the crowd stumbled backward from the sheer intensity. Kneel, Mara snarled. But Damian just stood there, unmoved, looking at her like she was unworthy to even speak to him. Mara's eyes widened in anger. How dare you resist? She solidified her aura into her fist and threw a full-powered punch directly at Damian's face. The air cracked with the force of it. But just as her fist was about to connect, Damian pressed the button on his aura-jamming bracelet. Busy ZT. Instantly, all the aura surrounding Mara's punch dispersed. Her eyes widened in shock. Damian caught her fist effortlessly. Then, before anyone could react, he yanked her forward by the arm, grabbed her by her ponytail with his other hand, and slammed his aura-infused fist into her face. Bam! Blood sprayed. Mara's head snapped back violently. The entire crowd gasped in unison. What the? He hit her. Damian didn't stop. He pulled her down to the ground and kept going. Bam, bam, bam. His fists, glowing faintly with aura, smashed into her face again and again. Mara tried to fight back, but without her aura, she was just a punching bag. Blood splattered across the gymnasium floor with every strike. Damian, Edrin's voice cracked as he tried to stand, clutching his ribs. Boss, that's enough. Damian didn't hear him. His crimson eyes were wild, crazed. Bam, bam, bam. The sound of fist meeting flesh echoed through the silent gymnasium like a drumbeat. Mara had already stopped moving. She lay there, her face swollen and unrecognizable, blood pooling beneath her head. But Damian kept going. Stop him. Someone stop him before he kills her. But no one moved. The sheer intensity radiating from Damian was paralyzing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Damian stopped. He stood up slowly, breathing heavily. Phew, he rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck. C-rankers sure have tough skin. Even without her aura activated, it took that many punches. He casually fixed his crimson hair, which was now disheveled and streaked with blood. The crowd stared at him in stunned silence. Some looked horrified. Others looked awed. Damian's gaze, cold and merciless, shifted toward Leonard and his group of nobles. Leonard's face had turned ashen. His hands, still in his pockets, were trembling. And when his eyes met Damian's crazed, blood-stained expression, he knew. I'm fucked. Damian took a step forward. The nobles behind Leonard instinctively stepped back. So, Damian's voice was calm now, almost casual, but there was a sharp edge to it like a blade hidden beneath silk. Did Mitchell never warn you idiots? You dare come after my people. You think I'm dead? No one answered. Leonard swallowed hard, his throat dry. Behind Damian, the injured commoners were staring at him with wide eyes. Tears streamed down Lysa's face, not from pain, but from something else entirely. Relief and gratitude. He actually came, she whispered. Edrin, still clutching his broken ribs, looked at Damian's back with a complex expression. This madman, I knew following him is the only way. Ronan, blood dripping from his mouth, grinned despite the pain. That's our boss. One of the injured commoners, a young girl with a swollen eye, reached out weakly toward Damian's direction. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Another commoner, lying on the ground with a broken arm, clenched his fist. Finally, someone stood up for us. The crowd of onlookers was still in shock. Did he just beat a third-year senseless? She's a C rank, and he's only E+ rank. Even without her using aura, he shouldn't have been able to beat her. That's insane. Wait, isn't he the top-ranked first year, Damian Valcor? The one who joined the student council. We commoners really have a leader now, it seems. Whispers spread like wildfire. But Damian didn't care about any of it. His crimson eyes remained locked on Leonard as he started walking towards him. Leonard's jaw clenched. His pride screamed at him not to back down. But his survival instincts were screaming even louder. Behind him, the other nobles were pale, their confidence completely shattered. One of them, a boy with slick-back hair, muttered under his breath, "What the hell do we do now?" Another whispered, "He's a monster." Damian took another step forward. The air grew heavier. Leonard's fists trembled. What the fuck do I do? Just as Damian was about to move toward the nobles responsible for hurting Edrin and the others. Stop! The crowd parted like a wave splitting before a ship. Gareth strode through, his presence commanding immediate attention. Behind him came the rest of the student council, Elizabeth, Liam, Ariel, and the others. Elizabeth's face went deathly pale as she took in the scene before her. Bloodied commoners scattered across the floor, nobles standing smugly to the side, and in the center. Her eyes landed on Mara. The third-year disciplinary committee member lay motionless on the ground, her face completely unrecognizable beneath layers of blood and grotesque swelling. A dark pool of crimson spread steadily beneath her head, staining the polished gymnasium floor. Elizabeth's hands trembled at her sides. "Oh my God," she whispered. Liam didn't waste a second. He rushed forward and dropped to his knees beside Mara, his hands immediately glowing with healing aura. The green light enveloped her broken form as he worked frantically to stabilize her. His face was cold, colder than anyone had ever seen. His eyes flicked briefly toward Damian before returning to his patient, and in that glance was unmistakable judgment. The tension in the gymnasium was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. Gareth's gaze locked onto Damian like a predator spotting wounded prey. His expression was dark, dangerous, furious. Time and time again, Damian Valcor, Gareth's voice cut through the silence like a blade. You create mess after mess ever since you joined this academy. His words echoed through the massive space. Every student present held their breath. It hasn't even been a month, and yet I keep hearing your name more than I hear my own. Gareth took a step forward. His B-rank aura began to radiate outward, thick, heavy, oppressive. The pressure slammed into the crowd like a physical force. Several students stumbled backward, gasping for air. Some fell to their knees, unable to withstand it. And now, Gareth's voice dropped to a dangerously low rumble. You even attack your own fellow council member, to the point of leaving her half dead. His golden eyes blazed with barely controlled rage. Do you think you're some kind of big shot, Damian? That no one can touch you, that no one can stop you? He gestured toward Mara's broken body. You used the aura-jamming bracelet on your senior, someone who outranks you in every way, and you beat her like a dog in front of the entire academy. Gareth's fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. You really love violence, don't you? You get off on beating people down. His smile was cruel, mocking. Why don't I show you what it feels like? Why don't I show you how much of an ant you really are? The crowd collectively held their breath. Before anyone could react, Gareth vanished. Boom! The impact was so loud it sounded like a cannon firing. Damian didn't even have time to blink before Gareth's fist buried itself deep into his ribcage with monstrous force. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of multiple ribs snapping echoed through the gymnasium like firecrackers going off. Ch-ch-ch. Damian's body folded in half violently, all the air forced from his lungs in a single, agonizing rush. But Gareth wasn't finished. Not even close. Before Damian's body could crumple to the ground, Gareth grabbed him by the hair with his other hand and slammed him face first into the hard gymnasium floor. Crack! The sickening crunch of Damian's nose breaking reverberated through the space. Blood exploded across the polished surface, spreading in a dark crimson pool. Oh my God! What is even happening today? Did you see that speed? Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd. Some students covered their mouths in horror. Others looked away, unable to watch. But no one intervened. Not Elizabeth. Not Ariel. Not anyone. Gareth straightened up, looking down at Damian's crumpled, bleeding form with cold satisfaction. Then he raised his fist again. Bam! He slammed it down into Damian's back. Bam! Again into his ribs. Bam! Again into his shoulder. Each strike was precise, brutal, calculated for maximum pain. It was even more crueler than what Damian had done with Mara. Blood splattered with every impact, painting the floor darker and darker. The crowd watched in stunned, horrified silence. Elizabeth stood frozen, her violet eyes wide and glistening. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Mara was her friend, a fellow third year, one of her strongest supporters in the student council. And Elizabeth knew, logically, that Damian had crossed a line. He went too far this time. He needs to understand, no matter how strong you think you are, there's always someone stronger. Even though she knew the truth, that the nobles had started this fight, that they'd brutalized the commoners first, she couldn't bring herself to stop Gareth. She turned her head to the side, unable to watch any longer. Her fists clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. "I'm sorry, Damian, but you need to learn this lesson." Bam, bam, bam. The sickening thuds continued. Ariel stood nearby, her gray eyes filled with internal conflict. By all rights, both parties involved in this incident were her subordinates. She was the vice president of the disciplinary committee. She should have been the one handling this situation from the start. But there was a reason she hadn't stepped forward. A reason she stood silent now. Damian had insulted an entire noble house. Not just Mara as an individual, but the Kestrel family itself. That wasn't something that could be overlooked, not in their world. Even if Ariel wanted to intervene, even if she sympathized with Damian's reasons. She was a noble too. We don't actively participate in the social construct, but that doesn't mean we're not part of it. Every noble was connected to the system. From the day they were born, they'd benefited from it in countless ways. So when the system was threatened, they had to protect it. Even if it wasn't fair. Even if it was wrong. That was just how their world worked. Gareth grabbed Damian by the face and hauled him upright, forcing him to meet his eyes. Damian's face was a bloody mess, his nose completely shattered, both eyes already swelling shut, blood pouring from his mouth. "What happened now, Junior Damian?" Gareth's voice was full of mocking venom. "Where's that precious aura-jamming device of yours? Why isn't it working against me?" He shook Damian like a rag doll. "You think Mara was weak. You think you're clever for using a gadget to beat her." Gareth's laugh was harsh and cruel. "Let me educate you, little ant. Anyone can use a device to gain a temporary advantage, but in front of real power, in front of someone who actually deserves their rank, all your little tricks mean nothing." He released Damian's face, letting him sway unsteadily on his feet. "I don't even need to use my skills against you. I don't need weapon arts. I don't need anything. You, an E-rank insect, couldn't hurt me even if I stood here doing absolutely nothing." Gareth raised his fist high, preparing for another devastating blow. The muscles in his arm rippled with contained power. "Let me show you what real strength looks like." "Stop!" A desperate, anguished shout tore through the gymnasium. Gareth paused, his fist frozen in midair. Everyone turned. Ronan staggered forward from the crowd of injured commoners, clutching his broken ribs with one hand. His face was twisted in pain, but his eyes burned with determination. Blood dripped from his mouth as he spoke. "It was our fault. We started the whole thing. If you want to beat someone up, beat us." His voice cracked with raw emotion. "Don't hurt him anymore. He was just trying to help us. He didn't do anything wrong." "That's right," another commoner shouted from the ground, struggling to sit up despite his injuries. "Damian wasn't the one at fault. It was those damn nobles. A girl screamed, tears streaming down her swollen face. "They're always unfair toward us. They started this fight." "Hit me instead, Senior." A boy with a broken arm pushed himself to his feet. "Damian was just defending us. He doesn't deserve this." "This is so unfair. Can't you see what really happened here?" One by one, voices rose from the bloodied, broken commoners scattered across the gymnasium floor. They couldn't just sit there and watch. Damian had come when they needed him most. He'd stood up for them when no one else would. He'd put his body on the line to protect them. They couldn't abandon him now. Edrin wiped blood from his cracked glasses and forced himself to stand, every movement agony. Lysa pushed herself up despite her injuries, tears flowing freely down her face. All the commoners who could still move began staggering to their feet. Their friends who'd arrived earlier rushed forward to support them, helping them stand, forming a human wall between Gareth and Damian. The crowd around them grew thicker. More and more students stepped forward. Not just the injured, but others too. Commoners from different sections who'd heard the commotion. First years, second years, even a few brave third years. Dozens of them now stood together, their bodies battered and broken, but their eyes burning with something that hadn't been there before. Defiance. Gareth's eyes narrowed dangerously as he surveyed the scene before him. The gymnasium had gone completely silent again. Everyone was watching, waiting. For the first time in the entire history of Stormhold Academy, commoners were standing united against the nobles. Not scattered, not divided, not alone. Together. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on anyone present. Elizabeth's eyes widened in shock. Ariel's mouth fell open slightly. Even Liam paused his healing for a brief moment, glancing up at the unprecedented scene. The nobles who'd beaten the commoners earlier were now pressed back against the far wall, their earlier confidence completely evaporated. Leonard's face had gone ashen, and in the center of it all stood Damian, bloodied, broken, barely able to stand. But still standing, Damian had been silent the entire time. Even as Gareth's fist shattered his bones. Even as blood poured from his nose and mouth. Even as pain screamed through every nerve in his body. He'd been waiting. Watching. Let's see if they really have the courage to stand up. I don't want to lead a group of cowards. Yes. Even while Damian was being beaten brutally, even while his ribs cracked and his face was smashed into the floor, his ruthless, calculating mind had been working the entire time. He hadn't come here just to be a hero. He'd never been one in the first place. Heroes were idealistic fools who died for causes that didn't matter, their sacrifices forgotten within a generation. He'd come here to test them. He wanted to see if these kids had any spine left after years of systematic suppression and humiliation. He wanted to see if they were worth his time, his effort, his protection. He wanted to see if they could be molded into something greater than what they were now. He wanted to see if this could be the foundation of something he'd lost in his past life and desperately needed in this one. An empire built not on fear alone, but on loyalty. And when he finally saw them stand, when he saw them put their broken, bleeding bodies between him and Gareth without hesitation, that was all the confirmation he needed. These kids had potential. Stop. Damian's voice cut through the chaos and noise like a blade through silk. Everyone froze mid-motion. The commoners standing protectively in front of him turned back in shock, their faces filled with confusion and desperation. Move back, all of you. His tone was calm, steady, carrying an authority that seemed impossible given his current state. But boss, Edrin started, his voice cracking with emotion and desperation. Damian's crimson eyes, swollen and bloodshot though they were, flicked toward him with unmistakable intensity. That single glance carried more weight than 1,000 words ever could. Edrin's protest died in his throat immediately. The commoners hesitated for a long moment, exchanging uncertain glances with each other, then slowly and reluctantly began to part down the middle. Under the stunned, disbelieving eyes of the entire gymnasium, Damian pushed himself upright. It took everything he had. Every ounce of willpower, every fragment of strength remaining in his battered body. His broken ribs screamed in protest with each breath. His vision swam and blurred dangerously. Blood dripped steadily from his completely shattered nose, running down his chin and neck. But he stood. Step by agonizing step, he walked forward through the gap the commoners had created, his posture somehow still proud despite the damage. Blood dripped from his face onto the polished floor with each movement, leaving a stark crimson trail behind him like some kind of macabre breadcrumb path. The entire crowd watched in absolute, breathless silence. Not a single person dared to speak or even breathe too loudly. Damian stopped a few feet from where Gareth stood and spat a thick mouthful of blood onto the ground between them, the sound echoing in the silence. Then he looked up, meeting Gareth's eyes directly with unflinching defiance. "I know I'm not strong enough." His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but in the dead silence of the gymnasium, everyone heard it with perfect clarity. "I'm weak, very, very weak compared to people like you." He took another painful step forward, his legs trembling but holding. "But tell me something, Gareth. Does being weak mean you should just sit back and watch injustice being done right in front of your eyes? Does it mean you should bow your head like a good little slave and accept oppression as if it's the natural order of things?" His crimson eyes swept across the massive crowd, across every commoner, every noble, every student watching this unprecedented confrontation. Being weak doesn't mean you just let anyone stomp you under their feet like worthless insects and accept it with gratitude. Damian's voice began to rise, strength flooding back into it despite his catastrophic injuries. "I'll teach all of you something important today, something that will stay with you for the rest of your miserable lives. I'll make you understand the true definition of what it means to be weak in this world." He started walking again, slowly, steadily, painfully, his gaze never leaving the commoner group that had stood up for him. Every single eye in the gymnasium was locked on him now, transfixed. Even Gareth stood silent, watching with an unreadable expression on his face. Being weak means you use everything in your power, and I mean everything you can possibly get your hands on, to fight back against those who suppress you, who step on you, who treat you like you're less than human. His words grew stronger and more passionate with each sentence that left his bloodied mouth. You use any advantage you can find, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem, any weapon within reach, any tool available, any opportunity that presents itself. You don't sit back passively and accept your fate like sheep being led to slaughter. You don't take it lying down like cowards. Damian's fist clenched so tightly at his side that his knuckles turned white. You sit back and wait. You watch everything with sharp eyes. You learn their patterns, their weaknesses, their moments of carelessness. You wait for the perfect moment, for your enemy to let their guard down even slightly, for them to grow comfortable in their superiority, for them to believe they've already won and you're no longer a threat. His lips curled into a bloody, utterly manic grin that sent shivers down the spines of everyone watching. And when that precious moment finally comes, you do one thing and one thing alone. He slammed his fist hard into his own chest, the impact audible even from a distance. You bite, and you bite so goddamn hard they never forget it for the rest of their lives. The gymnasium erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps, the sound building like a wave. But Damian wasn't even close to finished. His voice rose even louder, echoing off the high walls and ceiling like rolling thunder before a storm. Look at yourselves. Really look. You're already at the absolute bottom of this world's social hierarchy. What do you have left to fear at this point? What will you possibly lose by standing up and fighting back? He spread his arms wide in an almost theatrical gesture, blood still streaming down his face and dripping onto his torn clothes. So what if they're physically stronger than you? So what if they're born nobles with inherited advantages? So what if they hold all the institutional power and authority in this corrupt system? His voice reached an absolutely fever pitch that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Your purpose is not to win fair fights. Your purpose is not achieving glorious victory on some imaginary battlefield. Those are luxuries reserved for the strong, for those born with advantages. He pointed directly at the group of nobles cowering against the far wall, his finger trembling with rage and conviction. Your purpose, your only purpose in this world, is to make them bleed. The words hit the crowd like a physical shockwave, reverberating through every person present. Every single commoner in the gymnasium felt something powerful ignite deep in their chest, something that had been dormant for far too long. Damian's voice thundered on relentlessly, unstoppable. Make them realize that every single action, every petty injustice, every single act of casual suppression they commit will come with a very real price attached. Make them understand deep in their bones that there are actual consequences for their behavior. Make them bleed so much, make them suffer so thoroughly, that the next time they even think about hurting you, they'll hesitate. His crimson eyes blazed with absolutely unshakable conviction and terrible purpose. They'll hesitate not because you've somehow become stronger than them, but because they'll remember what happened last time. They'll remember the cost they paid. They'll remember the pain they endured. They'll remember that touching you, that raising their hand against you, means losing something precious and irreplaceable. Damian turned his burning gaze toward the nobles pressed nervously against the wall like trapped animals. Several of them visibly flinched backward, their earlier confidence completely evaporated. Just look at them. Damian's voice was absolutely filled with contempt and disgust. They don't suppress you because you're inherently weak or inferior. They suppress you because they know they can get away with it without facing any real consequences. Because they know their actions exist in a vacuum where they face no punishment, no retribution, no justice. He spun back dramatically to face the assembled commoners, his movements sharp despite his injuries. But what if that fundamental reality changed? What if every single time they raised their privileged hand against you, they absolutely knew beyond any shadow of doubt, that you'd make them pay dearly? That you'd fight back with absolutely everything you had available? That you'd leave permanent scars they'd carry forever, both physical and psychological? Tears were streaming freely down the faces of dozens of injured commoners now, cutting clean tracks through the blood and dirt. Not from physical pain, from something far more powerful. Hope, burning determination, purpose, a reason to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. So go ahead. Damian spread his arms again in clear challenge, turning back to face Gareth directly. Beat me into the ground, break every single bone in my body, crush me into paste if that's what satisfies your pride, kill me right here if you think you can. His manic grin widened despite the obvious agony the expression caused him. But know this with absolute certainty. Every single drop of blood you spill here today will be remembered by everyone watching. Every bone you break will become a story that spreads through this academy like wildfire. And when I stand again, and I will stand again, mark my words. His eyes locked onto Gareth with absolutely terrifying certainty and promise. I'll make absolutely sure you regret every second of this. The gymnasium had fallen into complete, total silence. The kind of silence where you could hear individual heartbeats, where breathing seemed too loud. Every person present, noble and commoner alike, stood frozen, processing what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't just a speech. This was a declaration of war. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Gareth stared at Damian with an expression that was impossible to read, some complex mixture of anger, grudging respect, and something that might have been concern. Finally he spoke. "You're done, Damian Valcor." His voice was cold, final, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Hand over your disciplinary committee badge and your aura-jamming device, right now." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs again. Gareth raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. "You are hereby temporarily suspended from the student council, pending a full investigation by the professors and administration. This matter has clearly spiraled completely out of control, and it's beyond our authority to handle internally anymore." He held out his hand expectantly, palm up. "Your badge and device, now." Damian didn't move immediately. Instead, he slowly turned his head, ignoring the spike of pain the movement caused, to look directly at Elizabeth. The student council president stood several feet away, her violet eyes wide and conflicted, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as if in prayer. Their gazes met and held. "Senior Elizabeth." Damian's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it cut through the silence like a knife. She flinched slightly at the sound of her name. "I need to know something before I make my decision here." He took a painful step toward her, then another, blood still dripping from his battered face. "What's your stance on all of this? Where do you stand?" The question hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Elizabeth's face went even paler, if that was possible. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Everyone in the gymnasium was watching her now, waiting for her response. The weight of dozens, no, hundreds of eyes pressed down on her from all sides. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. I think it's better if we involve the professors and the headmaster in this situation, Damian. This has gotten too serious, too dangerous. People are seriously injured. The rules have been broken on multiple sides. We can't handle this ourselves anymore." Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, and she couldn't quite meet his eyes directly. Damian stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of disappointment that was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. But he understood. Of course he understood. Elizabeth was a noble, born and raised in that system, benefiting from it her entire life even if she tried to be fair. She had her own pressures, her own obligations, her own impossible position to maintain. She was caught between two worlds, trying to bridge a gap that perhaps couldn't be bridged. And in the end, when forced to choose, she chose what was safe, what was expected, what wouldn't rock the boat too much. "I see." Those two words carried more weight than entire paragraphs could have. Damian reached up slowly and unpinned the disciplinary committee badge from his blood-stained uniform. The small piece of metal caught the light as he held it up, examining it for just a moment. Then he removed the aura-jamming bracelet from his wrist with his other hand. Without warning, without ceremony, he threw both items directly at Elizabeth's feet. They clattered against the polished floor with sharp, metallic sounds that echoed through the silent gymnasium. Elizabeth jumped slightly, staring down at them with wide, shocked eyes. "There's no need for any suspension, Elizabeth." Damian's voice was completely calm now, almost businesslike, as if he were discussing something utterly mundane. "I've decided to leave the student council entirely. You can give my position to someone more suitable. Maybe Leonard over there would be perfect for it." He gestured vaguely toward where Leonard stood among the nobles, pale and trembling. After all, it was an unjust council in the first place, wasn't it? Built on the same corrupt system as everything else in this academy. Why would I want to be part of that? Elizabeth's hands flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes immediately. Damian, I didn't mean. It's fine. He cut her off gently but firmly. You did what you thought was right from your position. I don't blame you for that, Elizabeth. Really, I don't. But I can't be part of something that won't stand up for what's actually right when it matters most. He turned away from her, facing the massive crowd assembled in the gymnasium. The injured commoners, the watching seniors, the stunned nobles, everyone. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the massive space. I want everyone here to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say, because I'm only going to say it once. Complete silence fell once more. Starting right now, at this very moment, I'm announcing the creation of a new organization. Not a club, not some official academy-sanctioned group, something completely different. He paused, letting the words sink in. Call it whatever you want, a faction, a movement, a family. His lips curled into a slight smile despite the pain. I prefer to call it the Mafia. Damian's eyes swept across every face watching him. Everyone who joins, and I mean everyone, will be looked after by me personally, protected, supported, treated fairly and with respect. No injustice will be tolerated within our ranks, not from anyone, not for any reason. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. I don't care if you're a noble or a commoner. I don't care about your family background, your talent rank, your social status, or anything else this broken system uses to divide people into categories. If you're with me, you're with me. Period. He spread his arms wide again. All are equal in my eyes. There will be no social construct among us, no hierarchy based on birth, no suppression of the weak by the strong, just one simple rule. His crimson eyes blazed. You hurt one of ours, you answer to all of us. The commoners were staring at him, with expressions of absolute awe and devotion now. So I'm asking now, who's with me? Who's ready to bite back? Who's ready to stop being victims and start being something more? Hands shot up immediately. Dozens of them, then more, then more. Edrin, Ronan, Lysa, every injured commoner on the floor. Students from other sections who'd been watching, even a few seniors from the balcony above. The response was overwhelming. Damian nodded slowly, a genuine smile crossing his battered face. Good, very good. Gareth and the other student council members, including all the nobles, were preparing to leave, clearly disgusted by the entire situation and wanting to wash their hands of it. But just as they turned toward the exit, one more thing. Damian's voice stopped them cold. They turned back reluctantly. Damian was looking directly at Gareth, his expression utterly calm and confident despite everything. I'm weaker than you today, Gareth. Significantly weaker. You proved that quite thoroughly, and I'm not arrogant enough to deny reality. He took a step forward, ignoring the pain. But don't forget something important. It hasn't even been a full month since I awakened my abilities. Not even 30 days. The implication hung heavy in the air. So enjoy your advantage while it lasts, because time is on my side, not yours. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. A warning wrapped in calm certainty. Gareth's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. After a long moment, he turned and walked out, the other council members following behind him like ducklings. Elizabeth was the last to leave, pausing at the doorway to look back one final time. Her eyes met Damian's across the distance. There was so much she wanted to say, apologies, explanations, justifications. But the words wouldn't come. So she simply turned and left. Only she knew why she was getting so emotional today. Those visions, it's starting. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud. Damian stood in the center of the gymnasium, surrounded by his new followers, blood still dripping from his face. He looked around at all of them. "All right then." His voice was businesslike now, practical. "First, let's get everyone to the medical wing immediately. No arguments. I don't care how minor you think your injuries are, you're getting checked out properly." He started moving toward the exit, gesturing for everyone to follow. "Can those of you who are less injured help carry the ones who can't walk?" Immediately, the less wounded students rushed to help their more seriously injured friends. Ronan tried to stand on his own and nearly collapsed, but two other students caught him immediately. "Easy there, big guy," one of them said with a shaky smile. Ronan laughed, then winced as the movement aggravated his broken ribs. Edrin adjusted his cracked glasses and moved to Damian's side. "Boss, thank you for everything." His voice was thick with emotion. Damian glanced at him, then reached out and clasped his shoulder firmly. "Don't thank me yet, Edrin. This is just the beginning. Things are going to get much, much harder from here." "I know." Edrin's eyes were bright with determination behind his damaged glasses. Together, the massive group of injured students began moving toward the medical wing. As they walked through the campus, other students stopped and stared in shock at the bloodied procession. Whispers spread like wildfire. "What happened? Is that Damian Valcor? Why are there so many injured people? I heard there was a huge fight in the gymnasium." But Damian ignored all of it. He just kept walking, leading his new family toward healing. Behind them, in the now empty gymnasium, drops of blood slowly dried on the polished floor. A permanent reminder of the day everything changed. After a few hours had passed, the entire campus, including every single professor and staff member, knew that something monumental had happened that day. The academy forums were absolutely exploding with activity, threads multiplying faster than anyone could keep track of them. Students who'd witnessed the events firsthand were posting detailed accounts, while those who'd only heard rumors were frantically seeking confirmation and additional information. The digital chaos was unprecedented in the Academy's recent history. Breaking news: Damian Valcor beats Mara Kestrel half to death in the gymnasium. Shocking: Damian Valcor openly insults the entire Kestrel noble house. Exposed: first-year nobles wound over 40 commoner students in brutal attack. Witnessed: Gareth Blackwood brutally beats down Damian Valcor in retaliation. Official: Student Council suspends Damian Valcor from disciplinary committee, pending full investigation. Unprecedented: Damian rejects suspension entirely and resigns from council, declaring it fundamentally corrupt and unjust. Breaking: Damian Valcor announces formation of new organization called the Mafia, vows to keep it just and fair for everyone regardless of status. Historic moment: commoners stand united against nobles for first time in Academy history. Bold declaration: Damian openly declares future conflict with Gareth Blackwood, vowing he will regret today's actions. The threads were getting thousands of views within minutes, comment sections turning into battlegrounds as students argued passionately about what had happened and what it all meant. Some praised Damian as a hero, finally standing up to systemic injustice. Others condemned him as a dangerous radical who needed to be expelled immediately. Nobody was neutral. Nobody could be. Inside the staff room of Stormhold Academy, practically every available professor had gathered for an emergency, informal meeting. The atmosphere was tense, charged with conflicting emotions and competing agendas. Everyone present wore varying degrees of complex, troubled expressions on their faces as they scrolled through their devices or discussed the situation in hushed, urgent tones. What the actual hell is going on around here? A strong-looking man with gray hair and sharp gray eyes spoke in a genuinely confused, almost bewildered tone as he looked up from his phone. "Who is this Damian fellow everyone keeps talking about? Why do I keep hearing his name constantly in the forums for the past week? It's like he's the only student who exists." He was Professor Edmund Ashford, a veteran educator responsible for teaching theory classes throughout the academy, a man who prided himself on focusing on academics rather than student drama. "You should pay more attention to the student rankings occasionally, Edmund." Nathan Brock, the completely bald, heavily muscled man responsible for the body training classes for all first years, spoke up from where he leaned against the wall. "Damian Valcor is the current first-ranked student of the entire new batch, top of his year in overall evaluation. The kid's got serious talent backing up his attitude." "I don't really pay attention to those ranking lists, Nathan. You know that." Edmund shrugged his broad shoulders dismissively. "It's not like that numerical ranking actually helps you understand who has real intelligence, who can think critically, who can actually use what they learn. Half the top-ranked students are just talented muscleheads who can't string together a coherent argument." "Well, this particular kid has been in the spotlight constantly ever since he first arrived on campus, so you might want to start paying attention." A woman with striking pink hair and matching pink eyes spoke calmly from where she sat with perfect posture in her chair. She was Professor Vivian Veritu, the homeroom teacher for the third-year Section A students, a position that gave her significant insight into academy politics and student affairs. Her expression was thoughtful, analytical rather than emotional. "One thing you all should definitely know about him. He's that same student the SFD has been keeping under active surveillance." As soon as she mentioned the Special Forces Department's involvement, every single professor gathered in the room looked toward her with expressions of genuine surprise. The SFD didn't monitor students casually or without serious cause. "I took the liberty of checking the official details we have access to." A man with distinctive green hair and calm green eyes spoke in a measured, certain tone as he entered the staff room, his white medical coat indicating he'd come directly from treating patients. Damian Valcor was apparently ambushed again by members of the Shadow Council criminal organization shortly after the Norrington incident that everyone heard about. And it seems increasingly likely that the major disturbance in Tranquil City recently, you know, the one where an entire building's top floor was obliterated, has strong signs of his involvement as well. He paused deliberately, his eyes shifting across the room. "Isn't that right, Salazar?" He was Professor Richard Evergreen, the homeroom teacher for fourth-year Section A and the primary administrator in charge of the Academy's medical wing. Professor Salazar Blackwood was indeed present, sitting somewhat apart from the others, but anyone observing carefully could see his face was unusually grave and serious as he scrolled through the forums on his phone, reading every post and comment with intense focus. "Don't slander my disciple with baseless speculation, Richard." Salazar didn't even bother raising his head from his device as he responded in a flat, warning tone. The SFD already conducted a thorough investigation into the attack on Quinton's skyscraper, and their official conclusion was that it had absolutely nothing to do with Damian. The matter is closed from their perspective. "If you say so, Salazar, I'm certainly not going to argue with you about your own student." Richard replied with a distinctly skeptical tone that suggested he absolutely did not believe what he was saying, but he wisely didn't continue pressing the point. The tension in the room had risen noticeably. "Forget all that speculation about outside incidents for now. We have a much more immediate problem to address." A professor with distinctive blue hair and matching blue eyes pitched in sharply, his voice carrying clear authority and conviction. "We should be focusing on what we actually know happened today, right here on our campus. This student, Damian Valcor, has used an aura-jamming device against his own colleague, a senior member of the disciplinary committee no less, and seems to be actively inciting the commoner students into organized rebellion against the established order. His tone grew harder, more insistent. We should make a clear, unmistakable example of him, and punish him as heavily as academy regulations allow. This type of conduct is extremely harmful to the academy's stability and reputation. If left completely unchecked, who knows what he might do next? He might even end up killing his own fellow students in some future confrontation. As soon as those words left his mouth, all the professors present made noticeably more serious faces. The insinuations his words carried were extreme, borderline inflammatory, suggesting Damian was a genuine danger to other students' lives. Salazar's head snapped up abruptly from his phone, his face flushing with anger. He opened his mouth to deliver what was clearly going to be an angry retort. But before he could get a single word out, Serafina Vale, who had been lying seemingly half asleep across her desk in the corner, looking utterly disinterested in the entire proceedings, spoke up first. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "Your name is Professor Emmanuel Langston, correct?" She didn't bother sitting up properly, instead speaking from her lazy, reclined position. "Forgive me if I'm remembering the names wrongly. It's only been a few days since I arrived at this academy, and I haven't bothered learning everyone's names yet. I don't particularly care about most of you." Her casual rudeness made several professors stiffen in offense. "I really don't like talking much in these tedious meetings, but your words just now were genuinely, remarkably stupid. So stupid that I feel compelled to address them directly." Serafina finally sat up, her violet eyes sharp and dangerous despite her disheveled appearance. "Rebellion. What the hell do you think this academy is, some kind of empire or feudal kingdom? These kinds of words, this kind of language, this kind of thinking, only entitled noble students and their enablers use such terminology." Serafina's voice dripped with contempt. "You actually think nobles are entitled to do absolutely anything they want without consequences? For years, commoner students have been systematically suppressed, isolated, and mistreated in this academy, and not a single hint of official complaint or concern has arisen from any of you gathered here today." She stood up slowly, her presence suddenly dominating the entire room. "And now that these students are finally going to develop some much-needed backbone, some basic self-respect and willingness to defend themselves, foolish people like you who only have their own comfortable positions and interests in mind suddenly can't sit still anymore. How convenient." Serafina's aura began leaking out slightly, making the air feel heavier. "Mind you, Professor Langston, in the military, the real military, where actual combat happens, you would have had your head literally cut off by now for uttering such blatantly biased, politically motivated words that undermine unit cohesion and equality." Her voice grew colder, harder. "Only you comfortable fools who spend all your time living safely behind these walls, never once fighting the actual monsters beyond the portals that threaten humanity's existence, could possibly utter such complete nonsense with straight faces." She walked forward slowly, her boots clicking against the floor. "All humans are fundamentally equal when it comes down to fighting for our collective survival against the greatest threats to our species. That's not ideology, that's reality proven in blood every single day on the front lines." Serafina's eyes swept across every professor present. "You and your precious noble families keep suppressing talented young blood based on nothing but birth circumstances, and we who fight to our death on the actual battlefield have to pay the terrible price of not having enough genuinely capable people when we need them most. When monsters break through, when entire cities are at risk, when real threats emerge. Her voice rose with passion and conviction. The Federation has finally realized this fundamental problem after decades of inefficiency and waste. And looking at the exceptional talents we received this year, they've started paying extra special attention to this Academy's practices. They even sent me, a battlefield general with an active combat record, to personally teach and protect these new students. She stopped directly in front of Professor Langston, looking down at him with undisguised threat. So let me make this absolutely, perfectly clear to everyone in this room right now. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner. I dare you, I dare any of you to even seriously think about punishing any commoner first-year student over today's events. In fact, I dare you all to even have the thought cross your minds. Seraphina's violet eyes blazed with promise. Because the next day, the very next morning, if I don't personally send your head flying from your shoulders, then my name isn't Seraphina Vale. As soon as she finished speaking, she released her full S+ rank aura to completely suppress every single professor gathered in the room. Silence. Complete and utter silence filled the staff room. The air itself seemed to freeze under the crushing weight of Seraphina's aura. Emmanuel Langston's face had turned completely red by the time Seraphina finished her declaration. Although it was genuinely hard to tell whether it was from the humiliation of her cutting words or from the suffocating pressure of her S+ rank aura pressing down on him like a physical weight. Probably both. Salazar Blackwood looked toward Seraphina with genuine respect, an undisguised awe shining in his eyes. He really, truly liked the spirit of this new professor. Finally, someone who understood. Someone who wasn't afraid to speak the truth that everyone else danced around with careful political language. Someone who actually gave a damn about what was right instead of what was convenient. Relax, General Seraphina, please. Richard Evergreen spoke up carefully, his voice notably sheepish and conciliatory, as he tried to diffuse the dangerous tension that had filled the room like poison gas. No one among us is actually going to interfere with the first-year students. You have my word on that. Although Richard was also an S-rank awakener himself, specifically S-rank, which was still incredibly impressive. He knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't anywhere near strong enough to match this legendary battlefield general who'd earned her reputation through actual combat. Fighting her would be suicide, plain and simple. That's right. Don't worry too much about what Emmanuel said just now. Vivian also jumped in quickly, trying her best to calm the volatile situation before it escalated further. Nobody among us even seriously planned to do anything about this situation in the first place. We were just discussing possibilities. That's all. Just talk. Her voice was soothing, diplomatic, the voice of someone experienced in navigating academy politics. Seraphina continued eyeing Emmanuel coldly for several long, uncomfortable seconds, her violet eyes boring into him like drills. Then finally, she restrained her overwhelming aura and turned away. Walking back to her desk, where she resumed her lazy, half-reclined position as if nothing had happened. Emmanuel immediately wiped the cold sweat that had gathered on his brows with a trembling hand. Inside his mind, he was thinking miserably that he definitely wouldn't have opened his stupid mouth if he'd known she was going to be that fiercely protective of the commoner students. Note to self, never, ever bring up Damian Valcor in Seraphina Vale's presence again. The room remained tense, but at least people could breathe normally again. Actually, Edmund spoke up again after a moment of heavy silence, breaking it with a thoughtful tone. Even if anyone here actually wanted to punish Damian Valcor for today's events, they wouldn't be able to do it anyway. Look at his weapon arts registration data carefully. Everyone immediately pulled out their phones or tablets again, scrolling quickly to check Damian's official academy records. There was a moment of confused searching, people squinting at their screens. "Damn," Nathan spoke in a genuinely scared, almost reverent voice as soon as he fully understood what Edmund was implying. "Ooh." Other professors who had been relatively silent until now also checked curiously, drawn by Nathan's reaction. But as soon as their eyes caught the relevant information displayed on their screens, they visibly stiffened. Their faces went pale. Emmanuel, still recovering from his earlier humiliation, looked down at his own phone with growing dread after observing everyone else's reactions. And the moment he saw it, the moment the information registered in his brain, he understood completely. Fuck, I really shouldn't have opened my mouth today. Why didn't I just stay quiet? Why? Serafina watched all these reactions with growing curiosity, her eyebrows raising slightly. She already knew perfectly well which weapon arts Damian had chosen to learn. He was her student in aura control after all, and she'd reviewed his file thoroughly. So why were all these experienced professors suddenly reacting like they'd seen a ghost? What am I missing here? As if sensing her confusion and unspoken question, Salazar explained with an unmistakably proud expression spreading across his face like sunshine. That kid, my brilliant disciple, has chosen to learn abyssal slaughter as one of his weapon arts. He paused for dramatic effect, letting that sink in. But here's the thing. There's only one person in our entire academy, hell, probably in this entire region, who's actually qualified and capable of teaching that particular art to anyone. Who is it? Serafina asked, genuinely puzzled now. Her knowledge of academy politics and staff capabilities was still limited since she'd only recently arrived. The headmaster, Vivian answered quietly, almost reverently. The name hung in the air like a physical presence. Ah, I see, so that's why everyone's freaking out. Understanding dawned on Serafina's face. It was common knowledge throughout the entire Federation, practically part of the cultural foundation, that whoever taught you your weapon art was automatically considered your master in the traditional sense. That relationship carried weight, obligations, protection. That was precisely why everyone present had been casually thinking of Damian as just Salazar's disciple until this moment, since Salazar taught him Omega Point. But now, with the revelation that Damian was also being personally instructed by the mysterious, powerful headmaster in abyssal slaughter, the entire situation changed dramatically. Damian wasn't just some talented commoner student anymore. He was the headmaster's disciple. So what right did any of these professors, regardless of their rank, experience, or noble connections, have to punish their ultimate superior's personal disciple? The answer was simple, absolutely none. Zero. Touching Damian now would be like slapping the headmaster directly in the face. Career suicide didn't even begin to describe what would happen. Some master-disciple relationships in their culture were considered even stronger and more binding than actual blood ties between family members. More sacred, more permanent. That was exactly why Salazar was currently feeling so incredibly proud that he might actually burst. His mind was racing with pleasant thoughts. Damian is my disciple through Omega Point, yes, but he's also the headmaster's disciple through abyssal slaughter. So technically, by the traditional rules of martial lineage, I could be considered the martial brother of the headmaster himself, right? We share a disciple, which creates a connection. As these increasingly narcissistic and ridiculous thoughts continued running wild through his head, Salazar actually chuckled out loud, a foolish, self-satisfied sound that made him look slightly unhinged. Everyone else gathered in the staff room could read his mind easily, following his transparent thought process written clearly across his face. Several of them shook their heads helplessly at this known weirdo, barely suppressing smiles. Salazar Blackwood was brilliant, powerful, and an exceptional teacher. He was also completely insane and had the social awareness of a particularly dense rock. Well then, Richard cleared his throat, breaking the moment. I think we can all agree that this matter is significantly above our pay grade to handle. The headmaster will deal with his own disciple as he sees fit. Our role is simply to maintain order and ensure no further violence occurs. Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Everyone was more than happy to wash their hands of this political nightmare. What about the injured students? Vivian asked, her concern genuine. I heard there were over 40 commoners who needed medical attention, plus Damian himself and that third-year girl, Mara. They're all being treated in the medical wing as we speak. Richard answered, his professional demeanor returning. Most of the injuries are relatively minor, bruises, cuts, a few broken bones. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully. Mara Kestrel is the most seriously injured, but even she'll make a full recovery with proper healing aura treatment over the next few days. He paused, then added quietly, though I suspect the psychological impact of today's events will last much longer than the physical injuries. That statement hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew he was right. What happened today wasn't just a fight. It was a turning point. A line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. The forums are going absolutely crazy, by the way. Nathan spoke up, still scrolling through his phone. Students are taking sides. It's splitting almost perfectly along noble commoner lines, with a few exceptions. Some nobles are actually defending Damian's actions, surprisingly, and quite a few senior commoners are calling him a hero. A hero, Edmund repeated thoughtfully, or a revolutionary, depending on your perspective. Either way, Vivian said softly, nothing is going to be the same after today. Whether that's good or bad, I suppose we'll find out. Serafina listened to all of this from her reclined position, her violet eyes distant. She thought about Damian, bloodied, broken, but still standing, still inspiring others to stand with him. She had also seen some photos circulating the forums as well. That kid, he's going to change everything, isn't he? A small smile tugged at her lips. Good, this place needed changing. Emmanuel Langston sat in the corner, thoroughly chastised and deeply regretting every life choice that had led him to this moment. He made a silent vow to himself. From now on, he would keep his mouth firmly shut about student affairs, especially anything involving Damian Valcor. That kid was clearly protected by forces far beyond Emmanuel's ability to influence or challenge. The smart move, the only move, was to stay far, far away from that particular storm. Salazar was still grinning to himself like an idiot, lost in fantasies about his new elevated status as the headmaster's martial brother. The other professors ignored him. They'd learned long ago that Salazar lived in his own reality sometimes, and it was best to just let him enjoy it. Outside the staff room, the academy continued buzzing with energy and speculation. Students gathered in groups, arguing passionately about what they'd witnessed or heard about. And somewhere in the medical wing, surrounded by his injured followers, Damian Valcor rested and planned his next move. You seem to get injured a lot. A tall woman with distinctive white hair and matching white eyes, dressed in a pristine medical coat, spoke to Damian as she finished tending to his various injuries with practiced efficiency. When Damian and the massive group of wounded students had arrived at the medical wing earlier, the entire clinic had become an absolute madhouse of organized chaos. Doctors and healing specialists rushed between beds, aura glowing from countless hands as they worked to stabilize and treat the seemingly endless stream of injured students. Damian had been given anesthesia along with the other most seriously injured students, those with broken bones, severe internal damage, or dangerous head trauma. Since he'd been feeling completely exhausted anyway, both physically and mentally drained from the day's events, he'd allowed himself to drift off into unconsciousness. He'd just now woken up to find this unfamiliar woman standing over him, examining him with sharp, analytical eyes. "Have we met before?" Damian asked her directly, studying her face for any sign of recognition. "When you fainted during your body training class a couple days ago, I was the one who patched you up and got you stabilized." The woman replied with obvious tiredness visible in her eyes and the slight droop of her shoulders. She and her colleagues had spent the last several hours working nonstop, taking care of dozens upon dozens of injured students without rest. It had been absolutely exhausting work. Looking at the clearly tired doctor, Damian felt a genuine stab of gratitude and expressed it sincerely. "Thank you for helping me that time, and for this time as well, Doctor." Dr. Isabel White." Isabel replied as her eyes continued scanning Damian's exposed torso carefully, checking with professional thoroughness for any remaining scars or injuries that might have been missed, before continuing. "Last time when you were here, you left in such a hurry that you didn't let me properly remove your scars. This time, I made absolutely sure to spend the necessary time removing everything completely. You should really take better care of your skin, you know. That particularly long scar across your face took an especially long time to heal and erase properly." "Did you remove that one as well?" Damian asked with sudden alarm, immediately reaching up to grab a small mirror from the nearby medical tray. The reflection showed a handsome face with mature, almost scholarly charm, long crimson hair framing sharp crimson eyes. His features were starting to lose that last trace of childish softness, becoming more defined and angular. Looking at the completely clear, unblemished white skin, he realized with growing dismay that all the scars on his face and upper body had been completely removed without a trace. Every single one. "Yes, naturally. I removed all of them. They looked quite ugly and unprofessional in my medical opinion." Isabel put on a genuinely confused look on her face, as she stared at what appeared to be a despairing expression forming on Damian's features. "My cool scar. A man is defined by the scars on his body, the battles he survived. There goes my entire intimidating look, and I haven't even wiped out that damn Shadow Council yet." Damian remembered vowing to himself, swearing on his brother's memory, that he wouldn't remove that long scar across his forehead until he'd completely slaughtered the Shadow Council, until every last member was dead and gone. It was supposed to be a reminder, a promise carved into his flesh. "Sigh, forget it, what's done is done." Damian sighed deeply, forcing himself to let it go and shift his focus to more important matters. "Thanks for treating me so thoroughly, Dr. Isabel. Are my friends doing okay, the others who came in with me?" "Yes, everyone is recovering well. For some of the more seriously injured students, full recovery may take a few more days of rest and treatment. But their ability to perform daily tasks won't be significantly affected starting tomorrow." "I see, that's good to hear. You should rest here for now. I'll go check on the others and make sure everyone's progressing as they should be." Isabel turned to leave, satisfied that Damian's injuries were almost fully healed and required no further immediate attention. As soon as she disappeared through the door, Damian got up from the medical bed and walked over to the large window, opening it to look outside. The sun was already setting beyond the distant mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and deep purples as the moon began its slow rise. Cool evening winds brushed against his face, carrying with them the scent of flowers from the academy gardens below. He stood there looking at the beautiful view, his mind processing everything that had happened today. His breathing technique activated automatically, almost subconsciously at this point. The aura in the surrounding area began flowing toward him in visible streams, being absorbed and refined with each controlled breath. By the time he finally snapped out of his deep thoughts and returned his awareness to the present moment, full night had already fallen. The moon hung high and bright in the dark sky. Without hesitation, Damian climbed onto the window ledge and jumped out, disappearing silently into the darkness below. In the eastern garden of the academy, a secluded area rarely visited by students at night, one figure could be seen standing perfectly still, looking up at the beautiful moon, which appeared crimson for some inexplicable reason tonight, as if stained with blood. As the figure stood there in complete silence, the ambient aura around the entire area visibly gravitated toward him like iron filings drawn to a magnet, creating subtle distortions in the air. "I see everything went according to your plan." Another figure approached smoothly from the shadows beneath the garden's ancient trees, his footsteps making no sound against the grass. The newly arrived person possessed a strikingly beautiful, almost ethereal face with distinctive purple hair and matching purple eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. It did. The figure already standing in the garden replied in a low, emotionless voice without turning around. "Did you really plan all of this from the very beginning, every single detail?" The purple-haired youth's voice carried genuine disbelief and something that might have been concern. Or was it just an incredibly lucky fluke that every piece happened to fall perfectly into place in the puzzle? "You already know the answer to that question, Adrian." "Yes, I suppose I do know some of it. You specifically told me to carefully spread the news of the commoners gathering to Leonard's group and make sure it reached his ears. But I genuinely didn't think that you'd planned everything that happened after that initial fight." Adrian paused, his expression becoming increasingly complex as realization dawned. "You predicted all of it, didn't you, Damian? You never planned on being a part of the student council in the first place." "Yes." The person standing calmly in the garden, bathed in crimson moonlight, was none other than Damian Valcor himself. When Edrin and the other talented commoners had first approached Damian weeks ago with the sincere hope that he would lead them, that he would become their support against noble oppression. That very same day, Damian had secretly contacted Adrian Murdoch and specifically asked him to spread carefully worded news about the commoner gathering to Leonard's social group. At that time, Adrian hadn't understood his true intentions at all. He'd thought perhaps Damian simply wanted to provoke a minor confrontation, maybe teach the nobles a small lesson. But looking at what had actually happened today, the scale of it, the brutality, the political implications, the fundamental shift in academy dynamics, it was abundantly clear that Damian had intended from the very beginning to make absolutely sure that commoners and nobles would have a violent, undeniable falling out, that there would be no going back to the previous uneasy status quo. "Why?" Adrian asked, genuine confusion and maybe even fear written clearly on his aristocratic face. "Why go to such extreme lengths? Why engineer something so brutal and potentially dangerous?" Damian was silent for a long moment, still not turning around, still staring at that blood-red moon. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and measured, like a professor explaining simple mathematics. "They approached me with the intention that I would lead them out of oppression. They wanted my support, my protection, my strength to help them escape the systematic suppression they'd faced their entire lives." He paused, letting that sink in. "But if I simply help them from the very start, if I hold their hands and shield them from every hardship, these new students will never truly understand what real suppression feels like. They'll never comprehend the depth of the problem they're facing." Damian's hands clenched slightly at his sides. They wouldn't develop genuine unity forged in shared suffering. They wouldn't know the true value of what I'm offering them. So letting them experience brutal, undeniable suppression firsthand, letting them feel it in their bones, in their blood, in their broken ribs, is the only effective way to make them understand. His voice grew colder. Any words that I might say to them, anything they might casually hear from sympathetic seniors in comfortable conversations, none of that would have any real, lasting impact. Words are cheap, pain is real, memory written in blood doesn't fade. Adrian felt a chill run down his spine despite himself. But Damian's tone shifted slightly, becoming almost amused. It's not like I directly asked those noble idiots to be so completely intolerable and violent. As soon as that fool Leonard received the news you spread, he summoned his subordinates and did absolutely everything by his own arrogant will. You knew he would react exactly that way. That's precisely why you specifically wanted me to spread the news among his subordinates, not among Mitchell's group or Iris's faction. Adrian said with dawning comprehension, a knowing look entering his purple eyes. Indeed, you're not as slow as you pretend to be, Adrian. Damian's voice carried a hint of approval. Mitchell is no fool despite his noble upbringing. He has genuine intelligence and at least some capacity for strategic thinking. And Iris might initially seem like just another arrogant, spoiled noble brat. He paused thoughtfully. But after carefully observing her behavior patterns for several days, I've come to understand her true nature quite well. She's a cunning girl beneath that mask of arrogance, genuinely cunning and calculating. She wouldn't have taken such obvious bait so easily. Adrian remained silent, processing this. He was starting to find this seemingly straightforward commoner student extremely, disturbingly scheming. From the very first day Damian had arrived at the academy, it had seemed as if he simply didn't care about anything related to student politics or social dynamics. He joined regular classes for only 2 days total, and afterward just attended the mandatory theory classes while skipping everything else. He'd appeared completely disinterested in academy social life. And yet, despite that apparent disengagement, he'd somehow gained an incredibly deep understanding of nearly everyone's behavioral patterns, motivations, and psychological weaknesses. Hell, when had he been observing so carefully? What about all the injuries and serious mental trauma that those commoner students suffered today? Adrian asked, his voice carrying an edge now, still feeling that all of this was simply too extreme, too cruel to people who'd already suffered enough. Some of them looked absolutely shattered, broken. I was there, you know, mixed in the crowd watching everything unfold. He'd seen their complete psychological collapse up close. He'd witnessed the absolute despair in their eyes as they were beaten down, humiliated, crushed. He understood intimately the kind of psychological shadows they might carry from this traumatic episode for years to come. All of this, it just didn't sit right with him at all. He was, after all, a Murdoch, heir to one of the 13 great imperial families. His family had always maintained a reputation for being genuinely fair toward commoners and treating everyone with basic human dignity. This level of calculated manipulation that caused real suffering to innocent people. It violated everything he'd been raised to believe in. Damian finally removed his gaze from the crimson moon, and for the first time since Adrian's arrival, turned to look directly at him. His face, now completely without scars, surprised Adrian momentarily. Damian looked more like an elegant young scholar, or perhaps a noble lord than the intimidating, battle-scarred revolutionary, who challenged the entire academy's social construct after being enrolled for barely a week. But his crimson eyes were cold, ancient, carrying weight that no 15-year-old should possess. It was just a fight, Adrian. They got beaten down badly, yes. So what? It was just a fight, Adrian. They got beaten down badly, yes. So what? Damian's voice was utterly devoid of sympathy. Aren't we all supposed to face actual monsters on real battlefields later in our lives? Creatures that want to literally tear us apart and devour our flesh. He took a step closer, his presence suddenly seeming much larger despite his youth. If even this much, a simple beating from fellow students in a relatively controlled environment, is enough to permanently break them psychologically, then what possible use is all their vaunted talent? What value do they have as warriors or leaders? His voice grew harsher. Even common gangsters from the underworld have vastly better mental fortitude and recovery capabilities than that. Street thugs who have never had any formal training can take a beating and come back swinging the next day. Adrian opened his mouth to protest, but Damian wasn't finished. All the people in this comfortable federation are starting to get far too used to extended peace and safety. Protected by walls and portals and the military, never seeing real danger, never facing actual consequences. His eyes narrowed dangerously. I genuinely wonder what will happen when monsters inevitably breach the portals again. When the walls fall, when the safe, comfortable illusion shatters. Adrian's face turned noticeably pale as he processed Damian's words, which seemed to carry absolute certainty that such catastrophic breaches would occur. Not if, but when. What are you talking about? The portals are stable. The military keeps them contained. We haven't had a major breach in decades. You'll realize the truth eventually, Adrian. Damian cut him off with finality. The signs are already there for those willing to see them. Monster activity is increasing. Portal fluctuations are becoming more frequent. The Federation is scrambling to recruit and train more awakeners than ever before. He turned back to the moon. This peace won't last. It can't last. So I'm preparing the people around me for what's actually coming, not for the comfortable fantasy everyone else is clinging to. Silence fell between them, heavy and oppressive. Adrian struggled to formulate a response, his worldview shaking. You're an extremist. I know for sure that you have far more crueler plans ahead, he finally said quietly. The methods you're using, the way you think, it's not normal, it's not right. Right? Damian laughed, a short, bitter sound without any real humor. Right is a luxury for peacetime, Adrian. Right is what people with power use to justify maintaining their comfortable positions while others suffer beneath them. He glanced back at the purple-haired noble. I'm not interested in being right. I'm interested in being effective, in actually changing things that need to change, no matter the cost. Even if it means hurting innocent people, using them as pawns. They're not pawns. Damian's voice was sharp now. They're soldiers in a war they don't even know they're fighting yet, and soldiers need to be forged in fire, not coddled in comfort. He walked closer to Adrian until they were face to face. Those students who got beaten today, they'll heal. Their bones will mend, their bruises will fade. But the lesson they learned, that they need to stand together, that they can't rely on the system to protect them, that they have to fight for themselves, that will stay with them forever. Adrian met his gaze, trying to read the truth in those ancient crimson eyes. And what about you, Damian? What are you fighting for? What's your real goal in all this? Damian smiled, a cold, dangerous expression that didn't reach his eyes. Power, Adrian. Pure, absolute power. The kind of power that lets me protect what I choose to protect and destroy what I choose to destroy without asking anyone's permission. He turned away dismissively. Everything else, the mafia, the social justice rhetoric, the revolutionary speeches, those are just means to an end. Useful tools for gathering loyal people and building influence. You're using them, Adrian said, voice hollow with realization. All those commoners who see you as their hero, their savior, you're just using them to build your own power base. Of course I am. Damian didn't even try to deny it. But here's the thing that makes it acceptable, Adrian. They're using me too. They want protection, resources, someone strong to stand behind. I'm providing exactly that. It's a fair exchange. He looked back one final time. The difference between me and the nobles they hate is simple. I'll actually deliver on my promises. I'll actually make them stronger, give them real opportunities, protect them when it matters. As long as they're useful to me, they'll prosper. And when they're no longer useful, the question hung in the air like poison. Damian didn't answer. He didn't need to. Adrian understood perfectly. You're just another monster, Adrian whispered. Worse than the nobles you're supposedly fighting against, because at least they're honest about their selfishness. Perhaps. Damian's voice was utterly unbothered. But I'm a monster who gets results. A monster who actually changes things, and in the end that's what matters. He started walking away, back toward the main academy buildings. You should go back to your dorm, Adrian. It's getting late, and you wouldn't want anyone asking questions about why you're out wandering the gardens at night. Adrian stood frozen, watching Damian's retreating back. He'd thought he understood this commoner student. Talented, driven, maybe a bit reckless but ultimately good-hearted. Now he realized he'd been completely wrong. Damian Valcor was something else entirely. Something far more dangerous than any noble faction or academy politics. Damian! Adrian called out suddenly. Damian paused but didn't turn around. Why did you tell me all this? Why reveal your true nature so openly? Aren't you afraid I'll expose you? Because you won't. Damian's voice carried absolute certainty. You're too curious now. You want to see how this plays out, where this path leads, and besides. He glanced back over his shoulder, that cold smile returning. You Murdochs pride yourselves on fairness and justice, yes, but you also recognize strength and competence when you see it. You're already calculating whether allying with me might be more beneficial than opposing me. Adrian's silence was all the confirmation needed. Damian continued walking, disappearing into the shadows. Adrian remained in the garden for a long time after, staring at the blood-red moon. Everything had changed today, and he had the terrifying feeling that this was only the beginning. Actually, what Damian said to Adrian was not all true. He planned everything, but he didn't completely lay a way out for all the parties involved. If nobles didn't start the fight, nothing would have happened. If Elizabeth had taken his side, he wouldn't have left the council. If Mara had not tried to attack him, he wouldn't have beaten her half to death. And I never planned to treat my Mafia badly. That part was indeed me going with the flow. I probably seemed like a cruel monster to him, but that's fine. Damian had treated his Mafia like a family in his past life as well. He wouldn't discard anyone who showed his loyalty to him. But I wouldn't spare the traitors either. Damian entered his room and started his breathing technique without any delay, as these thoughts were going on in his mind. He had not forgotten what was really important. Today's fight had indeed been a lesson to him as well. Gareth sure is strong. I need to find that old man as well. It's time I focus on abyssal slaughter as well. Time passed by quickly in the way it always does when people are focused on goals that matter. Soon it had been more than 2 full months since Damian first entered Stormhold Academy, and the changes that had occurred in that relatively short period were nothing short of remarkable. The current structure of the entire academy was undergoing a fundamental transformation that nobody could have predicted. Although this shift wasn't particularly visible among the senior classes who had their established hierarchies and comfortable routines, for the new first-year students the change was blindingly obvious to anyone paying even the slightest attention. For the first time in the entire documented history of Stormhold Academy, commoner students were not being systematically suppressed and bullied by the noble faction. It was unprecedented, revolutionary even. Of course, the situation wasn't perfect by any means. Many commoner students still chose to become subordinates to various noble families in exchange for access to better skills and weapon arts that they couldn't acquire through normal channels. That fundamental reality hadn't changed. But here was the crucial difference that made everything matter. The situation had improved to the point where these students weren't being forced into those arrangements anymore through violence, intimidation, or social isolation. They were making actual choices now, weighing options from different noble families. And that changed everything. Damian and his rapidly growing organization, which he'd boldly named the Mafia in that dramatic gymnasium declaration, made absolutely sure that no commoner students who sought their protection were bullied or coerced into arrangements they didn't want. The message was simple and clear: touch one of theirs and you'd answer to all of them. The student rankings were also changing repeatedly as people pushed themselves harder, though interestingly the top 10 positions had remained remarkably stable throughout this entire turbulent period. Damian himself still held the #1 spot with an iron grip, since no one dared to challenge him. Edrin, Lysa, and Ronan continued to occupy 3 positions in the top 10, creating a solid power base for the commoner faction. The remaining 6 spots were all held by members of the noble faction, creating an interesting but tense balance. One particularly noteworthy development had occurred among the elite students. The SS-ranked talents had finally begun showing their truly remarkable potential, and had all advanced to E+ rank during these 2 months of intensive training. And Mitchell, despite technically being the same rank as Leonard, Adrian, and Iris, had somehow started completely dominating all of them in actual combat effectiveness and political influence. He'd emerged as the undisputed leader of the entire noble faction. Meanwhile, Edrin, Lysa, and Ronan had all successfully advanced from their previous levels to solid E rank, and were now growing steadily toward E+ rank. It seemed as if everyone in the first-year class had suddenly gained wings during these past 2 months, soaring to heights they'd never imagined possible. Their confidence in their skills and weapon arts had grown tremendously. The competitive atmosphere was electric, pushing everyone to improve faster than they would have under normal circumstances. And Damian had maintained a rather mysteriously low profile ever since that explosive incident on the club's recruitment day. Many students rarely seemed to catch even a glimpse of his figure around campus anymore. He'd become almost ghost-like in his movements, appearing only when necessary and disappearing just as quickly. Rumors swirled constantly about how powerful he was now, but nobody knew for certain. In the dense forest behind the academy grounds, far from prying eyes and curious onlookers, a solitary figure could be seen swinging a terrifying-looking battle axe at the ancient trees with relentless, mechanical precision. The figure was completely shirtless despite the cool air, his well-defined torso gleaming with sweat under the filtered sunlight. His long crimson hair was tied back tightly, with a simple thread to keep it out of his face during training. His muscles were perfectly sculpted in a way that suggested both power and speed. They were lean and efficient rather than bulky, built for explosive movement and endurance rather than pure strength. Every swing of the massive axe showcased the kind of muscle control that came only from thousands of hours of dedicated practice. Thud, thud, thud. Only the rhythmic sound of the heavy axe blade biting into solid wood could be heard echoing through the quiet forest, creating an almost meditative atmosphere. The figure continued his relentless practice, each swing slightly different from the last as he made minute adjustments to his form, his grip, his breathing, his stance. Searching for something. Suddenly, the figure seemed to realize something fundamental, some crucial understanding clicking into place in his mind. His form became even more perfect, more fluid, more natural. And the massive axe in his hands stopped looking heavy entirely. It moved through the air as if it weighed nothing at all, as if it were simply an extension of his own body rather than a separate weapon. Boom! As soon as that profound change manifested in his technique, the next axe swing that fell cut completely through the entire thick tree trunk in one clean motion, as easily as a hot knife slicing through soft butter. The massive tree began to topple with a groaning crash. Phew, I finally did it. Finally broke through that damn barrier, lifting something heavy as if it were light. The figure was, of course, none other than Damian Valcor himself, who had been practicing almost non-stop for weeks to make this exact breakthrough in his weapon art mastery. Status: Name Damian Valcor. Age 15. Rank D. Talent S. Core attributes: Strength 95. Speed 99. Stamina 100. Vitality 100. Aura D. Will 170. Skills: Shooting B+. Hand combat B. Telekinesis D. Macrovision C. Sonic blink D. Aura control C+. Aura magnification 2 times. Weapon arts: Omega Point S, Level 2. Abyssal Slaughter SS, minor success. Damian stared at his status screen, with genuine satisfaction spreading across his face. For the past 2 months, he'd been seeking intensive guidance from various professors without stopping, pushing himself to the absolute limit of what his body and mind could handle. For improving his physical attributes, he'd sought out Nathan Brock so frequently that he'd almost driven the bald professor to doubt whether Damian's stats were even humanly possible for someone his age. Damian had already reached the absolute peak physical state for a D+ rank awakener in every category, now only waiting for his aura core to catch up and reach D+ rank so his overall ranking could advance. His physical body was ready, his core just needed time to grow. His will stat had also been rising slowly but steadily as well. This mental fortitude was actually one of the primary reasons he'd finally been able to advance his incredibly difficult Abyssal Slaughter weapon art to minor success today, after being frustratingly stuck for so long. Yes, he'd been completely stuck at the initiated level ever since he first started serious training in the Abyssal Slaughter art weeks ago. He genuinely hadn't understood why it was proving so extraordinarily tough to advance compared to Omega Point, which had progressed relatively smoothly. But he suspected he might get his answer very soon from that mysterious old man who'd first taught him the basics. That strange instructor had mentioned previously that he would seek Damian out once he managed to advance the art beyond the initial stage. His aura control and aura magnification capabilities had both also improved tremendously through countless hours of practice with Professor Serafina. Reaching 2 times aura magnification was particularly impressive. That was a level of efficiency that typically only expert veteran warriors achieved after years of combat experience. Only a handful of students in Stormhold Academy's entire history had managed to achieve it before graduation. The fact that Damian had reached it as a first year was genuinely remarkable. His Omega Point weapon art had also progressed to level 2, something that had made Professor Salazar endlessly, praise his own supposedly superior teaching skills to anyone who would listen. The man's ego had become almost insufferable, but Damian didn't particularly care as long as the instruction remained top quality. He'd also acquired an entirely new skill called sonic blink, specifically designed for explosive burst movement. Previously, he'd lacked any skill that could help amplify his speed beyond what his physical attributes naturally provided, so he'd spent considerable time searching through the academy library to find something suitable for his fighting style. Skills were genuinely special compared to techniques or weapon arts. They never required any aura expenditure to activate and use, which made them incredibly efficient and sustainable in extended combat. As the classification itself suggested, they were pure skills rather than supernatural techniques. Anything that a person practiced extensively and repetitively enough would eventually take the concrete form of a skill registered by the system. It was fundamentally related to how the human mind worked, particularly something called psions that Professor Edmund had explained in detail during his theory classes. In his words, psions were microscopic particles or waves that the human brain naturally produced and emitted, especially when performing actions with intense focus and repetition. When someone practiced a specific movement or technique thousands upon thousands of times, their brain would begin producing specialized psions attuned specifically to that action. These psions would gradually form what could only be described as mental pathways or neural shortcuts that made the action increasingly automatic and efficient. Eventually, if someone practiced long enough with sufficient quality of repetition, these psion pathways would crystallize into what the system recognized as an actual skill. At that point, the action became so deeply ingrained in both body and mind that it could be performed almost unconsciously, with perfect form, without requiring any aura expenditure at all. It was the difference between consciously using aura to enhance your speed versus your body, simply knowing how to move at maximum efficiency through pure muscle memory and mental conditioning. Consider psions as the aura of the brain in simple words. Your brain is consciously growing as well the moment you awaken, and the skills are your exercise for the brain. The human mind is really an incredible thing. Damian thought as he wiped sweat from his face with a cloth. Once you understand how it works, how to train it properly, the potential is almost limitless. Beep. His watch suddenly beeped with an incoming message, breaking him out of his contemplative thoughts. It was from Edrin. "Boss, everyone has arrived at the shooting range and is waiting for you." Damian glanced at the message, then at the destroyed tree lying on the forest floor, then back at his status screen still hovering in his vision. It's time to meet with the others, time to see how much they've all grown during these 2 months. He dismissed the status screen with a thought, grabbed his shirt from where it hung on a nearby branch, and started jogging toward the shooting range. He was curious to see what his Mafia had become during this period of relative quiet. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be SUPRISC for all of you. Stay tuned.